I did. YouTube is still sending.
Facebook's live.
Perfect. They're all live. Awesome. All right. Okay, well, welcome back to Season 1, Episode 2 of the Devy Hour pod and stream. I am your fearless host, or fearful host, I guess it just depends on the week. I am Brad Menendez, and with me, as always for 2 weeks in a row, is Paul Veldboom, my defensive, offensive partner in crime. How are you tonight, Paul?
Tired. The work week's been very long, but this whole weekend I get to get drunk in a field, eating sausage and eating cheese curds, watching vehicles go from 200 miles an hour down to like 50. I'm excited. I'm very excited for this weekend.
And for those that haven't been with us before, Paul is from the great state of Wisconsin. So that's why cheese was in the menu.
Yes. Yes. Yeah, my grandpa owned the factory for like 50 years, and I'm literally swinging right on through right before. Like,
You're going to be loaded up.
It's phenomenal. it's for Wisconsin at its worst with the snow and stuff sucks. Wisconsin, when you have good beer and the food, I'll take on anywhere. You got the food at other spots, but once you add the good beer, yeah.
I'm about to say, I've never been to Wisconsin, but everyone I know that's either lived there or been there talks about how inebriated the state basically is. It's like, well, to deal with the weather, they probably got to be something, right?
Yeah, there's a reason most of us are fat. I'll just be honest. There's a reason most of us are fat.
Just putting it out there.
Just being honest.
So that being said, now that we've gotten all the cheesy goodness out of the way, episode 2, we are talking Devy League draft tips. Basically, the idea of this show is when you're getting into your draft, whether it's your initial startup draft or year 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 drafts after that, what's some things to think about? Maybe some different areas to target, whether it's geographical school wise or position wise. It's things to think about. And that will probably take up the better part of the show. But we do have one bit of news and notes we want to talk about that's kind of sort of Devy related. So Ivy League schools have decided to postpone or probably wind up canceling fall ball. They're looking at possibly doing it in the spring. We've heard people like Saban in Alabama say, just wear a mask, you'll be fine, which I think is kind of the consensus now that we've been in the pandemic for a while. People are like, listen, don't be dumb, mask up, and you'll be fine. So what's your take on it, Paul? And do you think any of the other conferences are really going to go that direction, or is it just because Ivy League schools are Ivy League schools?
I think Ivy League schools are Ivy League schools, but within the last 4, 5, 6 hours, we've seen that the Big Ten is going conference only, which if they all decide that, all the Big Five, I'm fine with that. I'm fine with them simply saying at the end of the year that, hey, we're not going to have the bowl season outside of maybe the playoffs because the bowl schedule is useless anyways. Hey, let's go ahead and show up in let's basically not practice for 4 weeks, and then we'll go out there and practice for 1, and then we'll just hope that everything's fine, and then we'll hope that anyone who has NFL aspirations is behind us when they're not. I can see that just being axed out. You have the playoff. You might even expand the playoffs and make it 8, but be like, all right, everyone else is finished. That would not surprise me in the least. I know the ACC they haven't formally announced it yet, but I've heard rumblings that the ACC is doing the same thing. And if that happens, I can. If you're the other 3, why wouldn't you follow this?
Well, you know who this really button hooks is? Notre Dame. Because they're a team that,
Yeah,
they're a team that normally jumps around and plays a bunch of different conferences. It's like, well, good luck.
I've heard because it's a geography issue and they don't want to travel far. I can see Michigan being like, we're fine.
Come to the
Michigan
Big Ten.
State being like, hey, we're fine. I can see them. Yeah, I mean, honestly, I can see them being like, hey, who has an off week in the Big Ten? Like, and maybe you play Louisville, maybe you play
Ball
some
State.
of those schools.
Yeah.
Yeah, like you get your cupcake out of the way. Like the only thing that might save them is the fact that they're right in the middle there of the Midwest,
Hmm.
and they have enough options. And if they do go conference only, there's going to be enough off weeks for everyone
Hmm.
to schedule someone. Um, not that it might be a death nail for them as far as the we're going to hold the independents up. I think Navy will be fine, Army will be fine because well, they don't derive their money from football, but Notre Dame does.
Right.
But if the ACC falls, honestly, that would suck. That would suck as an FSU fan because I love whooping Florida every year. But if Florida's gonna whoop us, okay. Um, it's gonna be an interesting year because anyone who has a new coach, their job just became twice as hard. You you don't have anyone who knows the system. You don't have anyone who knows anyone, and you walk into it and it's hey, you're showing up with 70% of the guys that the old staff has, and if you weren't an assistant on that staff, have fun.
Well, and I thought, I mean, the interesting thing for me is think about, as especially more lately, how many college prospects that are getting ready to be draft eligible skip the bowl season anyway. So why not say, okay, this season we're going to try out this idea we had where either the bowl season's cut down or and we just make a real true playoff, and we say, hey, X amount of teams, the top 10 or 12 in the country are now playoffs, and that's it, because most of the guys from some of those other schools that were bowl eligible but didn't want to risk getting hurt, they weren't playing anyway. I mean, if I'm the NCAA at this point, I go, you know what? Let's rethink how we're going to do this. Obviously, they're going to factor in the money side of it because they're money hungry, but how do we do this and really try something that's revolutionary that might actually be entertaining to the fans? I mean, how many times have there been bowl games on where I'm like, I'm not going to watch this. I don't want to see this terrible bowl game that's just not going to be any good. And I'll just come back later and watch the all 22 of the guy I want to see, who may not even play because he's draft eligible.
Yeah, it's been it's been scarce the last 2 years. I remember Hakeem Butler decided he wanted in, but he wanted in at like 5 minutes before they kicked off.
Right.
I'm trying to think of like who else even went out there and was like, all right, I will risk getting hurt for the non-playoffs. Even the Rose Bowl has seen like, hey, see you later, I'm out.
Yeah, I mean
Like,
the biggest name is like
oh
Michael Pittman Jr. Because he was a
yeah,
team captain, he wanted to do it, and I thought that was a really high character move. But unfortunately,
yeah,
a lot of these guys they have to think of it this way, but they have to think of themselves as a business. So it's like, is it best
yeah.
for business for you to risk yourself for a bowl that really doesn't get you any money, but might get you hurt?
I asked the question, and I'm from Wisconsin, and I root for Florida State, and and for years I asked Wisconsin fans why they cared about playing USC in the San Diego County whatever, or why they're playing such and such a SEC school, Auburn, on January 1st. And every answer I heard from Wisconsin fans was this game should matter. We're Wisconsin. And my answer was if you're Auburn, would you rather beat Bama and just get absolutely kicked by Wisconsin, or would you rather beat Wisconsin and have Bama win by 3? If you're a USC fan, would you rather knock off UCLA or beat Michigan? And I'm not harping on these schools, but the rivalry game matters so much more than the useless bowl game, and it's finally being accepted by the guys who are actually on the field.
Right.
If it's accepted by the ones on the field, why should I as a fan care? It's the reason why Boise knocks off Oklahoma. It's the reason why Houston knocked off FSU a couple years ago. They don't care.
Well, and and it circles us back to a lot of the guys who are getting ready for the draft are skipping this thing anyway. They've already jumped into. I mean, because how
Yeah.
many of those NFL draft guys have already started draft prep in late December? Because they want to leg up on the combine coming up. I mean, it's and that's the tough thing, and that's where if I'm the NCAA, I sit back and I go, listen, what's going to make this a better product on the field? 700 bowl games that get individuals money but really don't entertain the fans and half the team doesn't show up anyway, or we rethink a playoff system that, okay, you're going to be top heavy because the top 4 teams are still better than the next 8 or however many you have, but at least then it's a playoff bracket, and and you can do some different things there. Like if I'm the NCAA, I just say 2020 is the year we're going to try something crazy and we're just going to do something different, and they won't, but they should.
Yeah, and speaking of skipping, I'd like to give a shout out to what was his name, Alex Hornibrook. You skipped the bowl game so that you could begin your draft prep. You went undrafted, unsigned, and the Canadian League's not interested in you. From every Florida State fan, oh, and especially one from Wisconsin, I'm not going to flip off the screen, but that's exactly what we think of you.
Yeah, it's sometimes guys bet on themselves, and that bet doesn't always pay off. And better luck next
Sometimes
time,
it
buddy.
was obvious.
Yeah.
Sometimes it was obvious 2 seasons ago
Well,
that you
yeah.
weren't going to make the league. Like, I just don't get why. Okay, if you're in the top 100 of the draft, yes, you should sit out. If you're not, you got to play, and you got to make an honest assessment with yourself, the same as you're making an honest assessment with your dynasty franchise. If you're not in that group, go out there and show it, because you're going to at least have solid film out there against, yeah, it might be someone who's not going to make the pros, but you can hope that someone sees that and thinks that you're worth it, and they go with it.
Well,
So
and
I
it
just,
it leads into, I mean, it's a perfect segue into what we're going into today, and it's like you said, an honest assessment. It's assessing how do you prepare and how do you draft these college guys that being a college athlete. Like I remember, I mean, it's been a long, long time, but when I was in high school, I was getting scouted by some major universities to play offensive line, and when I was preparing for the process and when I was playing, and you had to be an egomaniac. Like you had to think you were the best thing on the field, and you had to play that way, and you had to like exude this character that it's like these guys don't oftentimes really look at themselves and go, okay, this is what I am as an athlete. This is who I am. This is what I bring to the table. And you get this a lot where so many guys will apply for the NFL and be told, pre-draft they're told, oh well, you're probably at a day 2 pick, or maybe even a second, third round, fourth round, whatever, and then they go undrafted, and it's like somebody in this process probably
yeah,
should have said, hey, think about this. You've not produced great in college, you haven't looked amazing. What is it that you're showing the NFL that makes somebody want to draft you? And the same
yeah,
goes with our Devy leagues. So you're drafting Devy players. So you're seeing the same thing these college coaches are seeing. The only thing we really don't see as Devy owners is the character, unless they've done something stupid. Then you see the character because the news will tell you and you hear about it. But otherwise, you're drafting based on what you see on the field and what you've seen in high school and all that leading up. It's like, you got to be honest with the assessment of this individual and what your team looks like. So when you're doing a startup, what are some of the thoughts that you're having? Are there now obviously league specific will determine, if it's super flex, you're going to target more quarterbacks, things like that. But
Yeah.
what are you thinking about when you're drafting a startup Devy league?
Um, I'm thinking about how many guys have an elite ceiling that I can get my hands on realistically. Um, I'm the guy who takes Jaden Hasselwood as a freshman. I didn't end up with who is Julian Fleming,
Mm-hmm.
but I'm the guy taking these guys who are the top 10 ranked overall players, and that's for all positions out of high school. I am focusing 100% on talent and just hoping it works out because enough of these guys find weed, enough of them find other issues, they get hurt. I'm focusing 100% on talent with even some semblance of caring about the game. Um, it's not going to work out, but it's not going to work out regardless, or it's not going to work out 100%, but it's not going to work out even 50% of your strategy, whatever your strategy is. Even if you're the one looking at, okay, I'm only going to select upperclassmen because I've seen it. Yeah, but that means the price is that much higher. It's the same as the NFL. Would you rather have Jalen Rager or would you have AJ Brown? Well, I've already seen it, but yeah, but so has everyone else.
Mm-hmm.
So the price is so much higher. And I'm not sitting here saying, "Hey, you should select only freshmen or something." That's insane, but um I'm basically looking for talent and looking to see I'm sitting there in the fourth watching big name school X when the backup is in and the guy who's in front of him maybe is a senior, something like that. So this is his final year, something like that, just so I can see, okay, well, how did he perform? Because you're no longer heading off a high school film when that happens. Yes, it's the backups. Yes, it's whatever. But that also means the blocking's the backups also, or the quarterback throwing him the football, or whatever it is. The backups are the backups. I'm just looking for how does the talent then translate.
So you're saying talent now. When you're looking into guys, are you packaging in rivals 247 like where when you say the top 10 type of guys, where's your top 10 type of guys coming from? Is it just stuff that you're watching and you're like, listen, I think this guy's elite, or are you getting from a source and then kind of fact checking it and then saying, okay, I agree, this is probably a top guy?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, if there was a reliable answer on this, the college coaches who make millions a year would have the answer. They
Right.
don't. But you look at rivals, you look at ESPN, those are trash, but you still look at them. 247, I forget the other one, but you just look at all of them and you go, okay, they all have this guy first, or one guy has this guy as RB1, one has him at RB4. Is there something here that I see that, okay, he should be or is there something I see in which I say, okay, I can see why this individual would have him first, why this person would have him fourth, why this person has him number 40? I mean, is there something here that shows that? And that's all you're looking for. You're not necessarily looking to make your own mind up first. That's kind of a second look thing. It's almost like when you first watched Clyde Edwards Helaire. If you watched him and said, "Oh, this is the surefire 1-1" on your first watch, you're lying to yourself. It was that second look that you went, okay, he does this well, he does this well, it translates. I'm looking for talent first, translatable second, almost.
Yeah, and I asked the kind of the foundational question, but if anyone watched our episode or listened to our pod last week, it we basically talked about kind of how you prepare and what you look at. So throw in the idea of, are there any sites that you kind of base your content from? I try to take in all those. I'll throw Max Preps in there as well, just to name drop them because they're more high school related, but it's a good place
Yep.
to start if you're trying to see some of the bigger schools like the IMG academies, the Mater D's, and some of those, and see, because those tend to be the ones that funnel players into the big schools.
Yep.
I was just watching and actually just drafted in our pinnacle draft Lavasi Carroll, and I'm sure I'll butcher his name. He's a running back, but the dude looks like a college player in high school. I mean, he just crushes guys. And he's going to
Yep.
Georgia. Going into a big school like most. And when especially when I was still new into Devy a few years back, I kind of started at the top. I said, okay, let's look at the big college schools that tend to push out NFL caliber guys. Obviously the Clemsons, the Bamas, and some of those, and obviously we're in the Big Ten here in Wisconsin and Indiana, and I'm from originally from Michigan and was a Michigan guy. So I kind of looked at Big Ten, and then I was like, oh, outside of Ohio State and maybe sometimes Penn State, like the Big Ten just hasn't been pumping out a ton of amazing recruits that go to the NFL. Wisconsin tends to be good with the running backs, but that's really been it lately. So you start to look at kind of the big schools, and then you kind of funnel it down from there. But so much of and your Devy draft depends on league size, Devy roster size. So when I say these things, I'm using, kind of the 10 to 15 spot roster spots in my mind as I'm thinking through this, and I kind of try to build a roster very much like I did in my first draft in your league, which was this year, was the first draft that I did the Devy side of it. I drafted a quarterback. I drafted a couple running backs. I drafted a couple receivers, a couple tight ends, or no, one tight end. One tight end. I try to make sure I get a little bit of everything, mostly because I know that I'm not going to be 100% right. And some of these guys will wind up not being any good, just kind of the way it
Yep.
is because, it is what it is. I mean, college, it's like it's a shotgun. You're hoping one of them hits, but
No, it's the same thing. I mean, we're looking at it, or it's not the same because college guys are recruiting for college, but they also want to say, last year I had 5 guys in the pros, the year before that was 8, the year before that was 7. They can honestly look at kids in high school and go, if you sign with me, there's a statistically 50-50, 33%, whatever it is, shot that you make the NFL. Rival school X is lower, sign with me.
Mhm.
And that's just how it is. Um, but the reason that you look at big schools, maybe first and second, look at the first round of your rookie draft any of the last 10 years. How many of these guys ended up from big schools, and how many of them came from schools that you maybe haven't heard of? I'm not saying that they can't make it from other schools, and I'll explain why that happens, but just look how many of them come from those schools. There are basically 2 ways that you make the NFL and are successful. The first one is you've just had the talent all the way through, and you're just bigger, faster, stronger than everyone else. And how that happens is you have skill that gets refined, and you make the pros. The other option is you work so hard at it, and you have one of those rare bodies that as it grows, you get faster. It doesn't happen often, but when you see that happen, it's probably going to happen after you hit the NFL also.
Mhm.
I absolutely hated JJ Watt, but he had one of those, as he went from 210 to 280, he somehow got faster. And it's not explainable, but you'll see 3 or 4 of those guys every year, and what school they're from isn't necessarily big. You keep an eye on those.
Hmm.
I don't know. I don't know how genetically it happens, but they're absolute freaks. And J.J. Watt initially went to like Eastern Michigan or something. Kareem Hunt, Toledo. As he got bigger, he got faster. Watch those guys because they're the ones who ultimately are the huge successes. But you either have the talent or you develop it.
Well,
Those
and
and
you see some of those. There are some colleges. I want to shout out to one of the guys in my Pinnacle of Devy League, Travis May. He has a College to Canton podcast, and he's looking at a deep dive into these, running back U, quarterback U, like the colleges that just seem to be able to produce NFL caliber at a specific position. Think of like USC with their wide receivers. They always have a few wide receivers that make it to the league, and Penn State more and more lately is kind of becoming running back Miles Sanders and the Saquons, and they've even got some guys there now,
Journey Brown.
Journey Brown, there's so many, specific positions at specific schools that they just seem to know how to do it and get these guys to the pros. And, I think it goes along with what you're saying perfectly. You see specific guys, they get better in college, but the guys that you're mentioning, it's a work ethic thing. Like those guys worked their butts off and it showed.
On the other end of it, you have to ask yourself how the athlete got here, and Brown's one of the guys who, yes, he's at the bigger school, but he was what, the fourth or fifth highest running back that they even had recruited.
Hmm.
He's one of those freaks that you look at and go, he somehow got faster as he went from 180 to 210. Oh boy. If this season he shows out, you're drafting him second or third overall, and you can't wait till fourth or whatever. Um, Watch the guys who just doesn't matter what school they are, because if they're in high school and they're a receiver and they're 5'9", 175, and then they become draft eligible, and they're running a 4.7 or something, and then they hit up the combine and they're 6'1.5", 215, and they're running a 4.5. They're probably not maxed out, and the odds that they fail in the NFL are going to be so much lower than the guy who didn't necessarily work at it and went to the big school. And I know that seems counter on what we said before of you look for talent first, but they're two completely separate philosophies. You don't know that there are so many more who fail being the guy that's 5'9", 170 versus the guy that's 6'4", 230, and he runs a 2.4 second 40 in high school. But they're two separate philosophies, and they mix, and that is why this is so much fun.
Well, and think about it, so this is a Devy show. We're talking college. We are talking about, a group of, a draft pool, a talent pool of like what, 15, 16,000 players. I mean, think of all the colleges and all the players. Like, you're going to miss that under the radar guy,
Yep.
a guy that I just drafted in my Pinnacle of Devy draft, Nate Craig Myers at Colorado State. Not really known as a wide receiver university. I mean, the kid was a four-star prospect coming out of high school. He's shown out okay. I mean, I definitely think there's room to grow, but he's not at a place, looking at a team like Colorado State, they're not one of those teams where I'm like, you're pumping out receivers into the pros year after year. So, when I'm drafting a guy
Yeah,
like that, I see something that I like about him, then I'm willing to take a shot on him.
I actually think he's the second best receiver from that school, even despite him being a 4 or 5 star, I don't know, hybrid. If we're saying that, some had him as a 5, but
Right.
I actually like Warren Jackson more than him.
Well, I think Warren Jackson has some really interesting tools, and I think he can be a better big play receiver. I think Craig Myers is kind of like your bigger slot receiver type player,
Yeah.
and and that I think the NFL's moved to a place where they can support that big slot receiver if the guy's good enough. So I'm banking on the fact that I think Craig Myers is a little more athletic than your typical big slot. Thinking like the Devin Funchesses of the world.
Yeah.
You know, so I think they're just two different player types, but I like them both. I mean, I don't have a
Yes.
problem with either of
Yes.
them.
Yeah. They're Warren Jackson is his own, but yeah, it'll be interesting in seeing somebody like what Nate Craig Myers was. Let's say Donovan Peoples Jones would have moved on before his last year. These What happened to cause these uber premium athletes to be like, all right, I'm not going to hit up the sexy school. I'm going to hit up the school in the MAC, the school in the WAC. I don't even know what conference they're in.
Going to the Sun
But
Belt.
yeah, the Sun Belt. Like what happened where they went to FAU versus FSU? Like, how did this happen? Is it something that the kid's an idiot, or is there something else here? And that's where you have to kind of give them second chances. But even in the NFL, you look at guys that have the second chances. I'm a JJ Arcega Whiteside fan, but it almost feels like his first shot is over.
He didn't
I
get
don't
very
I
long.
Yeah, I don't think that that's right. I'm just saying that that's the way it is. College is the same way. If these guys fail, their value before they ever hit the NFL just goes through the floor to such an extent. But the initial thing that you asked here was, how do you look at it from the first year and second year? And yes, we did say talent. From the second, third, and fourth season and beyond, I'm just looking to get it's I'm just looking to get guys who make the NFL, and that's all I'm looking for. Yes, I hope they work out. I hope they hit. I hope they're all 1,000 yard, whatever. But you're looking for guys who make the show, and that's honestly all you can ask. Because even if they make the show, you can sell them immediately for whatever, and you move on. Position, I don't look at unless it's a true tie break. But other than that, I don't look at position almost at all in these leagues. I just want guys who make the show. I'll
Well,
figure it out later. If I have enough receivers and I draft another one in the first, then maybe I sell that receiver who's already in the league. I'll figure it out later.
Well, and after the first year draft, typically what I'll do, and this also is predicated on your owners being Devy savvy. So if you're in a league with guys that don't really know much about Devy and they just kind of go for the big names, after year one, and I did this. I mean, I even did this in your league as well. After year one, I kind of look for the guys that are maybe freshmen, sophomores that were 5-star recruits, and I look for the guys that were really highly touted that maybe haven't gotten a chance yet because Joe Burrow syndrome. They just have talented guys ahead of them that are on the field. Think of Joe Burrow. He was at Ohio State fighting off Haskins and all these other guys. He wasn't going to see the field anytime soon, whether he was more talented than them or not. These guys were going to get the chance until and then Burrow transferred to LSU, lit up the college world, and now he's a number one overall pick. I mean, so I'm drafting guys that I think will eventually be the guy, and And nowadays in college, you really only need one really good year of production for the NFL to go, okay, I'm gonna give you a chance. Hopefully you got more than that, but the way that guys are turning over and jumping into the transfer portal at such high rates, it's like, you might get one full season of college film on these guys because they're bouncing around the college.
Well, especially if they're at big school X that's always in the top 10 or whatever. You're just not going to see the field, even if you're a uber uh, recruit at some of these schools. Bama's second fiddle is as a senior, if they stick, let's just say for example, that's going to be higher than true freshmen who, even if they're five, athletes, they just aren't going to see the field. And I'll say this now: John Emery is clearly more talented at football than what Edwards Elair is. Whether it works out for him, we'll see. But as far as a natural talent perspective, he blows him out.
Mm-hmm.
He saw what, I don't know, 50 snaps last year.
Yeah, he didn't get a lot of
Just
action.
just because you don't see the field, and you're going to have the guys at the lower schools see the field because they don't have anything in front of them. You can't hold it over the 5-star athlete, but eventually at the end of this, you're going to be looking at Kenneth Gainwell. Hey, a 3-star recruit that no one heard of a year ago. Uh, David Ball or Bell.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Low 4-star, low 4-star. He might have been a 3-star. You're now taking this guy 5th, 6th, 7th receiver overall after one season. Sometimes like he saw the field, and you saw enough out of Wilson and Georgia guy's name. Remind me, the 5-star from last year, receiver.
Oh,
Pickens.
yes, George
He
Pickens.
barely saw. He barely saw the field, but did what you saw on film show, and that's why this game is just super fun because you don't know.
Well, and not only that, you don't know, but the tough thing is that some of these guys, I think of like Michigan. Like Michigan right now has three quarterbacks that I like. I unfortunately don't like their head coach or anything that they're doing, but I like Dylan McCaffrey, who could be their starter. I like Joe Milton, who could be their starter, and I like J.J. McCarthy, who it was just in the Elite 11 and showed out well. Like they've got three potential quarterbacks that they like. There's no way all three of those guys are going to stick around very long. If McCarthy doesn't get the starting job, he'll try to redshirt if he hasn't already, and he'll hit the transfer portal and go start for Arizona, or go to some other school where he's going to get a playing time. Because ultimately, these guys want to put stuff on the tape so that they can get drafted. Like that's what they're looking for, And so you have to look at that. And nowadays, as you're preparing for your drafts, you have to look at which guys, you have to kind of weigh it all together. You have to see what they were rated as and what kind of people saw coming out of high school into college. You have to look at what they've put on tape so far. You have to, there's so much more work that goes into it. And yes, that makes it more time consuming, but the payoff, when you hit, feels so much better because you're like, I said that. I said he was going to be good and he was good. So
Understand?
I mean, and that's the way it works. And, so you're taking shots like in our league this year, I took Kyle Trask. Nobody's really touching Kyle Trask. But I like his skill set. I like that he's a big quarterback with a big arm. And unfortunately, he's just not been on good teams. And maybe it's him, maybe it's the scheme, maybe it's all the above. I think there's a chance that maybe he gets a shot in the NFL at some point. So I'm like, I'm going to take a shot on him. Some of the other big names are already off the board. So I'm like, well, I'll know in the next year if this guy's going to make the league. And if not, I churn him, go get somebody else. Like, whatever. So that's sometimes my mindset when I'm drafting is like, okay, who's the guy that I'm going to find a quick return on? am I going to see if he's even going to be worth anything in the next year or so? Because some of the guys on my team, Bijan Robinson, I'm sitting on him for 2 to 3 years, and I fully expected that when I drafted him. Like, okay, I know I'm going to wait on that return, but I like the talent enough where I think he's going to be good. All right, I'll sit. So you have to decide that in your draft. Do you want to see guys make it to the league quickly, or hopefully make it to the league quickly, or are you okay waiting?
Some of it is how many spots are you looking at? Do you have two guys on your roster? Then maybe you go for the upper classmen only. If you have 10 guys or 5 guys, then maybe every year you draft one freshman and just sit on them and you hope they work out. I have a league, or we have a league, where you can have 10 to 15 off of what you, or if you want to use actual roster spots for the other 5.
Right.
Every year I make an effort to at least take one freshman. I don't remember if I did this season or not, but I make a conscious effort to sit there and go, you know what? I'm not going to have all these. Like, they're not going to all work out, but if I take one or two freshmen every single season, eventually those freshmen become juniors and seniors, and eventually I'm going to have one or two of those coming out on the other end.
Hmm.
So if I'm consistently putting in, eventually I should have premium athletes coming out every year also. And yes, I'm the clown who drafted JT Daniels. I can look over this league and say, hey, I drafted a bunch of other guys who didn't work out. I can also sit there and go, I drafted Cam Akers before he was ever in FSU, and now you drafted him second, third, or fourth overall. Um, Dobbins was about the same way. I drafted him as a true freshman in one league last round. I just flipped him for CEH and Tremaine Edmonds because the guy didn't like CEH for some reason. But um, eventually, if you commit on it, the pipeline flows through. So I don't necessarily look at it as, oh, I drafted him and I'm sitting on him for 3 years. Yeah, but I did that before, and now they're heading through also. And in theory, at least, you're going to have more talented athletes running through than everyone else if you stick with the philosophy. But that's a hard thing for anyone in any league ever, is to sit there and stick with the philosophy. I don't see
Yeah.
that very often.
Well, I mean, and that's with Devy, you have to be committed. Like, you have to say, okay, I'm going to be okay with sitting on some of these guys. And this is college potentially, freshmen through seniors. I mean, this is college, so you could potentially sit on a guy for 3 to 4 years, depending. Obviously, a lot of guys come out early nowadays if they're they come out as soon as they're draft eligible if they're one of the high end premium athletes and one of the best in the nation. But a lot of these guys. I mean, look at Joe Burrow. He was in college. If you drafted him when he was at Ohio State, you had to sit on him for years. And I don't know. I didn't have a Devy League that did. Even last year, nobody picked him up because even last year, LSU, he was a seventh round kind of prospect. People were saying it's like, ooh,
Yep.
nobody wants that quarterback. So that's the thing that you have to think about. If for me, for instance, in this draft this year in our league, I took Charleston Rambo, who's going to be coming in the league soon. I took Nico Collins, who could be in the league soon. Kyle Trask, who could be in the league soon. And then on the other side of it, Demarcus Bowman, he won't be in the league anytime soon. Bijan Robinson, Michael Mayer, the tight end from Notre Dame. I mean, these guys are, I kind of like half and half. Half guys I know are going to make it to the league or potentially at least be draft eligible within the next year or so. The others I know are probably going to be 2 to 3 years out. And when you're building a Devy roster, you have to, and this is where you obviously, your league settings. If this league has 10 to 15 spots, I wanted 15 or as close to 15 college players on my roster as possible. Because if I get them now, then I don't have to try to pay up to draft them later. Like in this league that you and I are in with some of the other guys on Roto Heat, I had to pay up and I got to get Joe Burrow at the 101 because I needed a quarterback. Like I knew
Yep.
going into it. So, I'd rather get him before I have to pay the premium.
Also, on the other end of that, this is a league that is deep enough where I would rather select first overall and then have, I'll just assume that everyone ends up having five.
Mhm.
But if you have a 5 rounder, I'd rather select first and then have the 5-9 or 5-9, 5-10, 5-11, and 5-12. You just have to look at what your league does, but that would be my philosophy. If I can get, elite because Burrow's more elite than everyone else, obviously your Devy leagues aren't like rookie leagues where you go, all right, well I have the one whatever, I should expect this. If you have a middle pack team, you have no clue what your first rounder is going to look like next year because you could have a cutoff at the 1-3. Like in this league, no one had CEH either, so he went second. And the 1-3 might be equivalent of the 205. You
Right.
you can have leagues where one year the 106 is as good as the 102. It is such a crapshoot, especially if you have it as a combo all in one, which I drastically prefer. But even Devy only, it is such a crapshoot on what you're going to end up with. In every league I've ever had, I'd rather have more selections late and one early versus, all right, I have one in the first, one in the second, one in the third, one in the fourth. Like, I want, because of the fact that this is such a crapshoot, I want as many shots at the premium as I can get my hands on, and then at the end of it, okay, I'll take whoever is left because I did my homework and I trust that my fifth rounder is really a mid third in my eyes.
Well, and that's a good point. So when you're and I would like to point out for those that are watching, I appreciate you guys hanging out with us. I would remember to remind you all, rotoheat.com, Paul and I and some of the team, we have our Devy rankings up so you can kind of see who we see as the consensus top. I think it's like 75, 80 players in college are. Look at those. So if you're newer to Devy or you're interested in Devy, start by looking at what other people have done. Don't be afraid to pull up other people's rankings. Go to some of the sites. Some of the guys that are on here. We have multiple Devy specific writers and content creators. So we rate these guys and we rank them. Jason Eldred and myself write up articles on a lot of the Devy guys, or have been, so that you can get a feel for. It's not really any different than preparing for your rookie draft. It's just you're preparing for guys that aren't going to be in the league anytime soon. So it's still, you're still looking for guys that have the ability to be good route runners at the wide receiver position. You're looking for burst at the running back position, big arm for quarterback. I mean, it's not any different. It's just you're doing it earlier in the process. So Devy leagues, I know people get a little like shell shocked by the idea of drafting college guys. It's not really that terrifying. We've got a league that I'm going to run probably 12-ish, 12 to 14 teams, and we're going to kind of do Devy and IDP. So people in the community that aren't as familiar with Devy and IDP can work with some of us and kind of learn how to do it. And it's not difficult. I mean, it just takes time. And most of it for the longest time, all I used was YouTube. I'd kind of pull up some of the rankings on Rivals and 247, and then I just go to YouTube and pick a player's name, search player name, all snaps, and just watch game film. And that's really what it comes down to is doing the homework, preparing, and then also looking to some trusted resources like us and saying, hey, what do these guys see in these players? How are they ranking them? What do they think is the top, at each position, and going from there? Because most people in Devy leagues, you're going to get Devy leagues that have guys that are super hardcore. In Paul's league, I'd say about half the league is probably pretty involved in studying college guys, and I'd say the other half of the league probably not so much. I mean, they probably do a little bit, but you can just tell based on how they trade or draft that they may not be quite there, and that's okay. I mean, you're ultimately this is a game, and we're trying to have fun, and it's ultimately we want to build a community of people that are working hard and preparing and building good Devy League. So. Um, Oh, somebody over on Facebook said Devy plus IDP and raised their hand. So I'm assuming they want in on that action. I know that we'll be.
It's fun. It's fun.
It is, and I apologize that that league we will wrap up and get that thing moving here soon. I've just been doing the fishbowl, and I've got the IDP guys invitational in a few weeks, and there's just a lot of different drafts. And then I got the Pinnacle of Devy draft with Shane and the crew. That's 100 rounds of college only, college and high school, I should say. I did draft some high schoolers,
I
so
thought I thought I was a hooker at this. Holy cow.
it's deep,
That's insane.
so
Oh,
we're
and the other thing is in this league, normal leagues have it where you have to be at least signed into college.
these aren't quite committed
In
players.
in the league he's referencing, they can be 1 year old and they can be drafted. That is nuts.
Dibs on Peyton's kid, eh?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay. Hey, uh, Peyton hooked up and had a kid. Oh, who picks third next year? There's a 50-50 shot that this kid's a franchise quarterback. If you completely miss,
so be
well,
it.
I'll grab the next one in the first round. Like that's
Yeah,
nuts.
it's definitely been interesting though, like to watch. I think we finally got into the 40s. I mean, we're getting close to halfway done with this thing, and it's interesting to see. I've had to really, after about round 25, 30, there was a few of us who were like, we got to do a little bit more research. We'll come back to our pick here in a minute. It's been fun though because it's a challenge. Like I've hit max preps up more in the last month than I probably had in the last 6 months. Just trying to prepare and get a feel for the big high schools and who are they about to pump out and all that stuff. So, there's a lot that can go into it, but Devy can be as deep as you want it to be. If you really only want to kind of hit on the big guys and then just build your league to be in such a way where you only have 2 to 5 Devy spots and everybody's kind of got the elite players. I mean, it doesn't have to be crazy deep, or it can be crazy deep. I mean, I like the challenge. So when the offer came up and the invite was sent out, I jumped on it because I like a good challenge. And as much as I enjoy, all the leagues that we do with Roto Heat, I wanted something a little bit crazier. I maybe went a little crazy, but it's still.
Yeah, yeah, that's a lot crazy. That's a lot.
No one will ever say that I'm not dedicated to fantasy football. I am
That's
preparing for high schoolers.
I drafted a 4-year-old. Come on, you don't need that burger now. You're
put down
four.
put down that Happy Meal. Grab that protein shake. We gotta get back out on the field.
That's right. We can't be having this crap. I already own you. Slavery? What's he talking about? Mommy!
Yeah. So as we wrap up, typically this would be the part of the show where we answer the questions. And I know that we have at least one college-related question. I've been kind of scrolling through, and I appreciate you guys throwing the comments up on Facebook and YouTube. For those that will listen or watch after the fact, we've got a growing Facebook community, thousands of heat seekers talking fantasy football, and Paul is one of our admins over there. So if you want to talk Devy, IDP, or any of the above, Paul's over there on Facebook. We've got a Discord server that we run that has chats for everything from Funko Pops to movies to fantasy sports to everything in between.
Anything you can think of.
Anything you can think of, we've got a chat for. So hit us up, join us. Rotoheat.com would be the place to find all that. We do have one question though. Sam Heward, how's he looking for this draft class? I'll let you start with it, Paul. I'm
Did you
sure
say
you have
Sam
some.
Hayward?
Yep.
You mean Sam Howell?
No, no. Was he quarterback from? Oh gosh, now I'm gonna be a draw blank.
Sam Hayward.
He is quarterback at. can't think of his high school right now. He's at Washington. He was the 5-star guy. He was the
Oh,
5-star prospect that you obviously wouldn't have seen him last year because of Jacob Eason, but he would be.
oh,
He's the next in line, I believe.
has he played at all?
No.
Oh, okay. He's in next year's. I'll be honest. I haven't scouted next year's just because I don't have leagues that draft high schoolers, so I do not know.
Okay, well then I will answer the question. Sam Heward looks legit. He's got. I really like his release. He's got a pretty solid arm. I don't know that it's Jacob Eason strong, but it's pretty close. He seems to be a very smart quarterback. I'm hoping Washington is a good spot for him. Obviously Jacob Eason showed out well there, and they've had some other quarterbacks in the last few years that have done well. So I think Heward is a guy, like if you're looking to target him, I would feel comfortable saying you can grab him with a pick. Most likely in your Devy drafts, he's probably not going to be one of the first couple quarterbacks just because he's still a few years out from being into the league. But he's a guy that I think you can sit on. He's a big kid. I think he's like, what, 6'3", 6'4"? I'm going to have to scroll up and see how big he is now. I think he's
Yeah, it was
six.
like 6'3", 175.
Yeah, so I'm about to say he's got the kind of prototypical NFL body type. He's obviously got to put on some muscle and some weight, which he will. I'm sure he's already in the weight room there in Washington. But he was a 5-star prospect out of Washington, Kennedy Catholic. That was what I was thinking. I knew he went to a Catholic high school there in Washington, and he stayed there and went to the University of Washington. So go Huskies! I think Heward will be an interesting prospect. I think when it gets to that point in time, when he gets to the league, I think he'll probably be in the conversation for a first-round pick. Folks were comparing him. Some of the scouts that I read compared him to like the Jared Goff type player, which some people like Goff, some people hate him. So I guess it just depends on how you feel about him. I definitely I think he's got a much quicker release than Goff, and that's and he's not even really played a college snap yet. So I'm a fan.
And
Uh,
if he's not a first rounder, and you have a shallow league, don't be afraid to Leonard Lake the situation, and just get rid of it before the verdict is out. If your league is shallow enough, cut bait and move on.
Yep. Jason over on YouTube, our boy Jason, wants to know Rashad Bateman, an early pick.
Yeah, I mean you can be selecting him. I mean I don't have my overall rankings up in front of me, but behind Chase.
I'm about to say he's top 5, I would guess, in most
Yeah,
league formats.
Yeah, I mean I'm trying. There's probably not a running back that I would want before him, mainly because I think Najee Harris is absolutely terrible, and
I don't.
Etienne is.
ATN would be the
I'm
one where I would
concerned.
argue and say I probably
I'm
like him.
concerned. Yeah, I'm concerned that he went back, if for nothing else, if the NFL said, "Hey, you're going round 5," and I'm concerned, and I own him in a league, and I'm concerned.
I
Um,
The only thing that'll button hook him is if college doesn't play out the way it's supposed to this year. But I expect him to be one of the top running backs taken next year. I mean, look at all the teams that need running back help, even now. I think he'd be fine. He would be the one that I would think, like, Najee Harris, I'm not as huge a fan of just because Bama running backs, I never seem to have good
he's
lucks with
both.
them. Ugh, don't say that. As a Lions fan, I've seen Bo Scarborough. Yeah, definitely top 7, though, Jason. So, good question. Rashad Bateman is definitely a guy I like.
Yeah, even Superflex, he might be the top 7.
Absolutely. Well, in Superflex, I would say easily still top 7. In a regular standard format, probably like top 4.
Yeah,
Probably even top 3
I'm
or 2.
I'm trying to think. There isn't a tight end above him. And there's good ones.
Pat Freer isn't Pat Freiermuth would be in that next class. He might be the only tight end I would think would be up there, but I don't know that I would take him above Bateman.
Yeah. There's 3 of them next year who really
Brevin,
stand out.
yeah, Brevin Jordan,
Uh,
Pat Freiermuth.
Pitts.
Oh yeah, Kyle Pitts. Yep.
But there's not one of those I'm taking over him. Chase, I'm taking over him. Quarterback, is the super flex? Is it not super flex?
Right.
Um, Other than that,
Chuba Hubbard might be in the conversation, but I would still probably take the wide receivers before him.
Devy rankings. I'll just pull up some random Yahoo's rankings and see what comes up there. Rondale Moore, some people have ahead of him. I do not. Chuba Hubbard, I do not. I had a big when I thought he was going to be in this year's. I wrote down that I think he's a workout warrior, and I wrote down in all big capital letters, do not end up with this guy. And I highlighted it, put big signs next to it. Do not draft this guy. Um, Waddle, I can somewhat see, but Bateman,
No, not ahead of Bateman.
Yeah, he might be second overall for me. I mean, obviously, it's a fluid situation. If you look at anyone's top 50 right now, and then you look at it in 6 months, it's gonna look different.
Well,
And
it's going to change because guys like Justin Ross and that nasty neck injury. Justin
Yep.
Ross. Like if you look at Roto Heat, Justin Ross was ahead of Bateman. That's not going to stay that way. As soon as the rankings get
Yep.
updated, that's going to change. So over on Roto Heat, Bateman in a standard format comes in at number 6. Sorry, yeah, 6, but we know that's probably higher than that because Justin Ross is ahead of him. So, um,
Yeah.
even that, so he's easily top 5, probably more like top 3, depending on who you like. So, good question. And that's a conversation that there's so much fluidity to it because that's obviously based on the guys we're pretty sure are going to be in next year's NFL draft. Think of how many underclassmen declare every year. That always muddies the water when you have to factor in guys that you may not have been thinking were going to go. So
Yeah. It's and I'll be honest, I'm looking at someone else's rankings, not Roto Heat's right now. Even the rankings that I'm looking at, they look completely different than they did mid-March. So even within the guys who look at this stuff, their minds change after they see someone new. Don't be afraid to say, "Hey, this is not working out for whoever I like," or "This is working out for them." Don't be afraid. It's not like dynasty rankings where you go, "All right, well, he's pretty firmly here." Outside of the top 5 to 10 on any season, don't be afraid to be like, I don't see this. And I'm a Florida State fan. At the site that I'm looking on, Tamarion Terry is number 9 overall. I think he's a fourth or I'll say third to fifth round selection. I'm not selecting that ninth overall. I'm not selecting that 39th overall. Don't be afraid to say no. That's not what I see
right.
for any of these guys.
Yeah, ultimately, rankings mean nothing if you haven't looked at the guys and made sure you're comfortable with them.
Yeah.
Still do your work. So good questions. And always know that if you guys are live with us over here on YouTube or Facebook, we will make sure you get your questions answered live on the air. If not after the fact, you got to find us on one of our platforms: YouTube, Facebook, Twitter. Wherever we're at, find us, talk to us, Discord. Um, we do have one more question before we wrap up. Gophers Tanner Morgan is projected to be a first-round pick. Thoughts on that? He was a backup to Zach Anixtad, who got hurt.
I'm sorry, who?
Tanner Morgan. The question was actually about, do you think Tanner Morgan's a first rounder? He's the Minnesota quarterback. Um, I'm not a big fan of him. I know there are quite a few folks that I've listened to and talked to that do think that he's probably very NFL caliber. But with as many quarterbacks as there are right now in college that I think are better than him, could be in that draft class. I mean, think of the Trey Lances of the world and some of the other bigger names. I just don't know that there'll be a spot for him. So I wouldn't lean on him as I wouldn't bank on him being an NFL first rounder. I would bank on him kind of being more of a developmental guy that may only ever get to backup status. But that's mostly because he doesn't have a specific thing that puts him ahead of some of these other guys. Like he's got a solid skill set and he's not a bad quarterback, but
Yes. Yeah, I saw someone who has the frame. I don't know if he has the game for it. Now, if he really shows out this year,
could change.
Burrow went first overall, and everyone had him in round 6.
Yep.
I mean, I don't see it for him. I don't think he has the feet or the mind, but I mean, like I said, Burrow can prove us all wrong. Even the guys who get paid millions for this, they get it wrong. I'm not going to sit here as someone who does this for fun and be like, "Oh, well, I'm going to think down upon myself for not seeing this." No one saw it.
Well, and I trust PJ Fleck. Like that guy just turns things to gold. So if anybody's going to do it, he's going to do it. Like he took the Chippewas, made them a very good bowl team. He's gone to Minnesota and quickly made them one of the better teams in the Big Ten. I'm like, I trust him as a head coach. He's a good coach. So I haven't been able to put my finger on that specific position that he pumps out quality talent every year. I think it's probably going to be wide receivers that he's really going to be known for when everybody looks back, but could be quarterback.
I have heard that he might be maxed out at what he is though, because he is more of a you rah rah guy versus a real coach.
Right.
But he's also taken the school of the blind to the not the BCS, the New Year's Six.
Right.
He took that to New Year's Six, and Minnesota. I don't remember if they were in the New Year's Six or if they were in the equivalency ranks last year, but he's made Minnesota legitimately
Relevant.
good,
Hmm.
and that's got to frustrate you as a Michigan fan. But I mean, it's
It frustrates me that we didn't get him. He was in our backyard and we let him leave the state, and we keep Khakis, who wins the games that he should win and loses games that he should win as well. I mean, it's like, you know, so I would rather the young up and comer who's hungry and going to fight for it than, the guy who's sucking up 7 mil a year to trot out subpar offense with okay defense.
yes, it's very. If you can't sense this, we have a Michigan fan and an FSU fan on this show. Last 5 years have been really frustrating. Really frustrating.
I don't want
Oh,
10
hey,
I don't want 10 wins in a crappy bowl performance.
like, hey, they're like, one of our schools is producing NFL running backs like their lives depend on it. At least Michigan's putting a defender in the league every year. That's all right. But other than that, there's a lot of frustration on
Yeah.
on our faces.
Yeah. And then last question. So Tagovailoa's brother, what do you think of him?
Didn't he transfer out because he sucks? I mean, not to be too
No,
blunt, but
isn't I thought he stayed at Bama.
I thought he transferred.
No,
Oh,
he.
and also, side note,
Oh
if
yeah, he
someone
did.
does
Yeah.
hit the portal, I'm instantly more concerned. If you have guys who liked you and signed you, basically say, "Hey, you're better off heading somewhere else," that is a major red flag. Now, if you're Jalen Hurts, for instance, there's a clear and obvious reason why this happened. If you don't have obvious of why this happened, major red flag in my eyes.
Yeah, my
Now, I
concern.
do,
Oh, go ahead.
and the only one who does not concern me this year is Trey Sermon,
Hmm.
just because he wasn't going to see the field as often, and he can see the field at. There was at least another one of these top 5 every seasons programs who not only said, "Hey, you're going to see the field, you're our guy." He's the only one who hit where I didn't go, "Oh boy." He's the only one.
Well, and for a guy like Tagovailoa, the issue I had with him is I don't know that he's really good enough to be an NFL quarterback. Like, he's one of those guys that I could easily see the little brother. I could easily see him. He transferred to Maryland, and the tough thing, goes back to a conversation we had earlier in the show, is that um, he's on a team with like Mac Jones and all these other quarterbacks. Well, it's going to be hard for a guy to get playing time unless he's heads, kind of head over quality better than, much better than any of these other guys. But, a team like Alabama, like they kind of go with the next man up, and Mac Jones is that next man up. So he's going to get the shot. So, now you're looking, okay, maybe 2 years out, does he get a chance? Some guys just don't want to wait that long. They want to get on the field. But little brother, I just don't know is going to be a good quarterback, period, just because he's a dual threat guy that kind of leans more on running than passing, is okay passing, not the greatest with a deep ball, but has an arm to do it. I mean, he just needs a lot of coaching, and I just don't know that, and especially in Maryland, he's not going to get that. I mean, think of all the Maryland quarterbacks that have come out.
He'll see the field, but he's almost like Leonard Fournette in the fact of uh, why did why is he here? Last name. Oh, anything else? Um,
Nope.
he's not going to be the worst athlete you've seen on the field, but he's here because of last name. They gave the scholarship to someone because they wanted his little brother. I remember when actually, ironically, Vince Williams has been in the NFL for 8, 9 years now. They
Hmm.
gave him a scholarship so that they could get Carlos, who played 1 year in the league and then couldn't stop smoking weed and never fulfilled what he wanted. It's amazing how they give those token scholarships to Texas. Deontay Foreman was a horrible pro, didn't work out.
Yeah.
They gave him the token scholarships us so that they could get his brother at receiver, who ironically was the 4-5 guy, completely missed. So if you see those situations, don't look at the last name.
Right.
It means nothing.
Yeah, it doesn't always have the same effect, and in this situation, I don't think little brother's going to be nearly as valuable as Tua.
Yeah.
And on the other side of it, another quarterback that was mentioned in the chat, Sam Erlinger, I see him as kind of a backup in the NFL. Maybe that, I could see him as a career backup unless he does something special this year. He's just not really.
He doesn't have the arm.
Yeah, there's really nothing special about him. He's kind of like another quarterback from Texas that's been in the league for 10 years, Colt McCoy. Great
Yeah.
guy, high character, smart as a whip. He's great
Pistol
with the
arm.
great with the short passes, but not a guy that. Now I can say in the pinnacle of Devy draft, I do have Erlinger. I threw him on my roster because I got him late or later, but
Wasted
it's just not a guy who's
selection.
going to make it.
Wasted selection. John Emery was there 5 picks later. What were you doing?
I got a little. So many quarterbacks went that I maybe made the bad choice, and I accept that. It happens. So, So yeah, I wouldn't jump on any of those guys in a shallower Devy draft. They're not really going to do you any good. Don't look at name, look at the player, see the talent. If the talent's there, then take them. Uh,
Yeah.
so, so thanks for everybody hanging out. We made a what should have been probably 40-minute to 45-minute show, an hour and 15. So great job asking questions. It was a good conversation. Next few weeks we'll be back talking specific players, talking about kind of our top players at different positions. Also looking to have on some guests and things like that in the coming weeks. We'll also review the Pinnacle at Devy draft that I've been doing, kind of nitpick a little bit, maybe talk about some players that went that maybe went a little higher than they should. Obviously, we've already got a spoiler that Sam Erlinger went way too high. So yeah, so stick with us. This is a weekly show, so Paul and I will be back on YouTube every Thursday night, 9:30. The podcast will drop after that, and make sure you share our stuff. Share it out on Twitter, out on the world. Let everyone know to check us out because we want to help. If you have Devy questions, hit us up. Like I always say, rotoheat.com is the main source. That's where you can find all of our stuff at. Facebook, Discord, Twitter, hit us up. So for Paul,